great architecture, you need to have a good client. Maybe not a great client, but you certainly need to have a good client. If you have a great client, it's even better. So it's very easy to say this because, for example, if you look at the career of one of America's greatest architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, he designed a few great buildings and a lot of pretty mediocre buildings. And it's not that he lost his talent at some point, but he had different clients. So the actual client, the composition of the client and the client decision-making process is very, very important to the work of architecture. So that's just a bit of context. And so what often happens in cultural institutions, and certainly I'm much more familiar with cultural institutions in the United States. I mean, it's a board of trustees, it's a group. Here, it's a family, and a family with very strong opinions, which I think is a blessing, and with an open mind, and also, frankly, an open heart. And I think that those kinds of discussions about then the values that a building is supposed to reflect, not about, oh, this is nice, this is ugly, you know, those are the kinds of discussions that we had. And again, it was not much more complex than going out and trying to find the best talent at work in this country and to give that talent an opportunity to potentially be the architect of the new building. And part of that was doing this competition not just as a way of giving the IMS 6 teams to choose from, but a way of showing the Brazilian architectural community that, look, this is how, this is what we're doing, this is what we're capable of doing. We have jurors, we were joined on the jury by people from various countries around the world, so this is what we're capable of doing, and this is what we're capable of sharing with the world of architecture at large.
O professor Anelli tem estudos sobre os arquitetos imigrantes italianos aqui, e justamente nesses anos 50 nós tivemos muitos concursos privados na cidade. O Edifício Itália, a Galeria Metrópole, vários dos clubes sociais até hoje, Paulistano, Hebraica, tiveram seus concursos, igrejas, sinagogas em São Paulo tiveram concursos. O que aconteceu para hoje as pessoas se surpreenderem com um concurso privado como o do IMS? Já viram? Se tornou uma raridade, não digo só hoje, eu diria nas últimas décadas.
Difícil de pensar. Primeiro, eu acho que o concurso é muito importante, mas não é uma panaceia. A gente tem grandes edifícios construídos em São Paulo que são referência e que não são fruto de concurso. O MASP, né? O Sesc Pompeia, para ficar só na praia da Lina Bobardi que a gente vem estudando. Eles são frutos de um processo de colaboração entre a arquiteta e, no caso do próprio marido no MASP, né? Pensando, refletindo inovações, né? Da forma de curadoria, de exposição e arquitetura para isso, né? Que, enfim, criou uma forma de expor e um edifício que hoje é reconhecido internacionalmente e bastante pela população paulista como um ícone da cidade. Então, nem sempre o concurso é necessário ou dá bons resultados. Nós temos, no caso dos concursos públicos, né, nos últimos 20, 30 anos, uma sucessão de desastres. E muito se fala sobre o custo da promoção do concurso, né? Mas qual é o custo da categoria dos arquitetos, que vai para a categoria dos arquitetos, em termos de investimento, da produção de 200, 300 projetos, para, né, ser escolhido um que no final não é construído? Então, de uma certa maneira, os concursos no Brasil, infelizmente, foram se desmoralizando, né?
Competitions are one of several mechanisms to choose an architect. And so it's not a question of whether competitions are always the right answer. They're not always the right answer. They bring certain opportunities and they also bring certain problems. I mean, I mentioned the Beaubourg competition. I think there were 600 submissions to the Beaubourg competition, and ultimately Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers were chosen. They were in their 30s. I think it's safe to say they never would have gotten the job if the directors of the Beaubourg just started to call around and choose someone. So in that case, they were able to get somewhere at 34, 36 that would be highly unlikely without the mechanism of the competition. It's similar also for Jorn Utzon in the Sydney Opera House. He was also in his 30s. But it's important, as Ramon mentioned, this is not always an easy thing. Winning is not always winning. I mean, Jorn Utzon quit the project before it was finished. I mean, it ate up his life because these projects become, in essence, if you're an architect in the audience, you know this very well. You have perhaps 2 months to design a building. You don't actually have the opportunity to understand all of the issues, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's construction, whether it's zoning. You don't have the opportunity to fully understand those issues, and yet you need to propose a building. And then what can happen is a jury can fall in love with a building that is in essence, it's in essence a fantasy. So we're on a jury, we fall in love with a project, and then we go away, and somebody has to try to figure out how to build that project. And maybe that project has a material that's never been used before. I mean, it's a bit, we can start among us referring to a lot of these competitions where somebody did a beautiful rendering and then they tried to build that building and it did not turn out as well as the rendering promised. So again, competitions bring certain benefits, and in the case of the IMS, to get back to it, yes, as Fernando said, the IMS could have called up any architect in the world and just said, we'd like you to do our building. But the reason there was a decision to go with a competition was the conversation that comes from a competition, not just internally, but also with the architectural community and hopefully with the wider public.
A gente tem que lembrar que a Avenida Paulista, em 2010, 2011, não estava tão na moda quanto hoje. É pré-abertura para os pedestres nos domingos, é pré-Japan House, é pré a reforma do Sesc, uma longa lista. Como foi discutido à época a escolha desse terreno?
E eram 3 terrenos muito distintos, muito distintos. Quer dizer, eu vou citá-los aqui. Um na Cracolândia, tá? Uma oferta do governo de São Paulo para tentar potencializar aquela região perto da Sala São Paulo. Mas era um problema absurdo, não é? Ou seja, e aí no fundo a resposta, cada terreno, foi isso que eu coloquei, precisava de uma resposta arquitetônica diferente. E daí talvez o caráter do Instituto de entender a sua própria personalidade e tomar essa decisão. Na Cracolândia eu opinei, aqui precisa de uma bomba arquitetônica. Aqui precisa de alguma coisa muito forte. Aqui precisa de um frango, não é? Quer dizer, o outro terreno era o Parque Augusta. Era o Parque Augusta. Existia uma opção de compra baratérrima de toda a área. Eu falei, olha, isso é muito grande para o Instituto. Vocês vão ter que aqui formar uma quadra aberta, né, fazendo um complexo, e o Instituto vai ser a joia da coroa. Vocês estão dispostos a isso? Não dá para colocar um prédio pequeno dentro daquela área toda, não tem sentido. E aqui eu disse, olha, é um terreno apertado. Se vocês têm certeza que cabe o programa, é um endereço ótimo. Mas aqui eu escrevi isso, não precisa ser uma joia arquitetônica, precisa ser uma coisa de joalheiro, precisa ser um Zunter.
Justamente onde não houve concurso nas últimas décadas, o Brasil, especialmente os concursos públicos, a gente contratou, ou seja, governos estaduais, federais, municipais, poucos arquitetos. Eu acho que, aliás, há gerações de arquitetos brasileiros muito bons que não tiveram acesso à possibilidade de uma grande obra pública, porque poucos eram os favoritos de políticos de todas as cores. Como foi essa decisão de não se chamar arquitetos estrangeiros e essa decisão aí dos chamados arquitetos jovens? Como foi essa seleção em estilo, idade, experiência, para eles entrarem nesse grupo de escritórios?
Well, we touched on this earlier. I think you can certainly see this site and this project as a great opportunity for someone from abroad. And as I think we've all said, you know, the IMS could have hired anyone they wanted. Why they didn't choose someone from abroad? I mean, I think there are a lot of issues that come with actually building a building that are very difficult and that are very specific to a place. And so inherent in a choice from abroad are the realities of whether that person's work translates to the climate here, whether it translates to the construction industry here, and all of that. But we didn't really spend that much time discussing that. That's something that I think would have been worth discussing if we had gone further down the path of considering foreign architects. Here, again, it was about what the IMS has spent a lot of its time focusing on in the past 25 years, which is expressions of Brazilian culture and expressions of the humanities in Brazil. So if we had been more kind of on the edge about do we go international, do we go for, we might have gone more into the pros and cons, but I think it pretty quickly became not the right direction in terms of choosing an architect. And then after that, what we did in that first period of going to 15 offices is get a sense of the office and get a sense of the capacity of the office. So it was our view that anyone that made it to the 6, we had confidence that they could do it in general terms. Now, some of the offices were larger than others. Some of them had had more experience at this scale than others. But we had a sense that any of the 6 could execute a project in a slightly different way, perhaps, but could execute a project. And then when you're putting together a choice of 6, you know, out of a larger pool, you kind of try to get a variety. You don't want to have the 6 smallest offices, for example, or the 6 offices that have only done residential work. So you try to have within that kind of group some variety, and so that fell into the discussion as well. And then it's just because, you know, I think ultimately, certainly for me, you know, you're excited by talent. So that's what you want to see at work. That's not to say that the other architects weren't talented, but for some reason, the ones that we chose to participate in the competitions were ones we were excited to see what they would come up with.
Aproveitando que a Karen disse, eu queria perguntar para o Serapião, o que você acha que precisa mudar, especialmente nos concursos públicos no Brasil, com essa taxa aí tão alta de projetos não realizados?
Eu apontaria 2 os problemas principais para o fracasso do concurso como modalidade. Né? No fundo, eu sempre escuto dos arquitetos da classe, quer dizer, que estão à frente dos institutos, que puxa vida, é a melhor modalidade para escolher um projeto, como é que todo mundo percebe. E no fundo a minha argumentação é, bom, tem alguma coisa errada se o político não está adotando isso como prática. Não estou nem discutindo a boa ou a má política, mas estou discutindo a questão pública no sentido positivo da palavra. Tem algum nó que não está bem fechado. E o ponto, um dos pontos, eu tenho a impressão que é sempre o comprometimento com o financiamento daquela obra. Né? Ou seja, e aqui nesse caso, eu acho que todos os que participaram, tinham quase a certeza de que ia ser realizado, por isso foi tão disputado. Quer dizer, no fundo, a gente tinha de lá do balcão um cliente, entre aspas, sério, né? E do lado público, isso nem sempre acontece. Então, no fundo, a estatística que a gente trabalha é que 30% dos concursos só são executados, os públicos, no Brasil, né? Então, quer dizer, os outros 70%, eu tenho a impressão que muitos deles são realizados como propaganda política, como propaganda de gestão, né? E o calcanhar de Aquiles da instituição dos arquitetos é que o concurso é uma garantia de rentabilidade. Quer dizer, para os institutos, o concurso é muito rentável. Por quê? Porque a instituição pública contrata o instituto para organizar. Então, é a melhor fonte de renda que o instituto tem. Então, os institutos não batem nos problemas, creio eu, por esse calcanhar de Aquiles. Tá? Então, esse é o principal problema que eu aponto. O outro problema sério no concurso público é que o cliente não toma decisão. Quem toma a decisão é um grupo de experts que não tem responsabilidade alguma sobre aquilo. Depois de alguns dias reunidos, pega um avião e tchau. Não é? E o prefeito, o governador, quem foi que organizou aquilo, olha para aquele resultado, pode achar horroroso aquilo, pode não gostar e pode engavetar.
E aí começam os problemas, porque o compromisso com a viabilidade, a execuibilidade daquele projeto com o orçamento disponível pelo cliente, vai para onde? Eu acho que isso é uma questão séria na formulação dos concursos, que é em que medida que os projetos mais interessantes do ponto de vista da arquitetura são aqueles que são factíveis. Parece óbvio, né? Mas há uma cultura arquitetônica contemporânea, de uma certa maneira, que se espalha por aí, onde essa relação entre a proposta da arquitetura e a sua viabilidade, ela deixa para lá, né?
As for, making a prognosis about whether competitions are here to stay or going or whatever, I kind of stay away from that. I mean, I think when you get to the level of Frank Gehry or Renzo Piano, you'll hear that a lot of architects at a certain point don't want to participate in competitions, and that's certainly everyone should make whatever age, whatever level of recognition, or whatever level of success. It should be everyone's personal choice whether they participate or not. I mean, as it's been pointed out, competitions are a tremendous drain on resources. Sometimes architects are paid a small amount to participate in a competition, but it could cost their office 10, 15, 20 times that amount of money, so they can be money losers. Frankly, I've seen a lot of competitions that are abusive in a way to architects because they expect so much. They expect people to do work for free in essence. So I often am in a situation where I advise against a competition. But they're going to be around for a while because they have been part of the culture of architecture for a while. And people tend to participate in them when economic times are difficult and they're trying to get more work. And when they don't need that much work, they tend to participate less, but that's the only real generalization I would make. For those of you who were here for the dedication, the official dedication, as Fernando mentioned, João Moreira Salles made a beautiful speech about the DNA of the IMS, which is both the house and Gavia, but I think very importantly, he spoke about his father. And he spoke about how his father accomplished a lot in his life and had many successes. But if I understood the translation correctly, his father was most proud of being a he was an ambassador, and he was most proud of his public service. And so one of the things that makes me happiest about this building is that spirit of a generous citizen of the city, of the country, of being a public servant, which I think is the spirit of the father that Joan described, and I think, frankly, the spirit of his 4 sons, based on my experience. I think that spirit of being a public servant is what is present here in this building, and that's the thing that we all responded to actually in the design presentation, that the building of a box within a box, it's both there, it's protected in a way so that the special work of this place can happen, but it's also open since the external box is glass. So that is the part about being a proud participant in the life of this place in this country. And again, I think after hearing that speech yesterday, it reminds me something that's, architecture is ultimately about people. It comes from people, and it's to be used by people. It makes me very happy to think that, that the genesis, the real DNA of this is Walter Moraes Ellis, and that there's some part of him present in this building, the way his son described it, and that makes me very happy.